My name is Claire Whitmore, and I was fired by my own brother. Not just fired, erased. I gave 14 years of my life to Whitmore Escapes, the boutique resort chain our family built from the ground up. While Lucas played the role of Golden, boy shaking hands with investors and posing for press photos in crisp linen suits, I was the one making sure our properties ran like clockwork. I trained staff, overhauled maintenance systems, negotiated vendor contracts, and personally handled guest complaints when needed. I never craved the spotlight. I just wanted to build something real. And I did. When our father stepped down, Lucas slid into the CEO seat like it was always meant for him. 10 days later, just 10, he called me into the office I designed, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "We need to refresh the executive team. New vision, new energy." Then handed me a severance folder like I was a stranger who'd just finished a temp job. No warning, no gratitude. Just a corporate consultant from an international firm already sitting in my chair before my nameplate was even removed. I sat there in silence, the fluorescent lights humming above us while Lucas adjusted his overpriced cufflinks like this was just another business transaction, like I hadn't stayed up nights during hurricane season coordinating emergency evacuations. Like I hadn't spent Christmas Eve 3 years ago personally helping guests rebook when a booking system crashed. None of it mattered. What stung most wasn't just the betrayal, it was the cold efficiency of it. The way he said, "It's nothing personal," when everything about it was personal. The way HR already had the paperwork printed and labeled. The way my keycard stopped working before I even left the building. I boxed up my things while my brother, the same boy I used to cover for when he broke curfew, walked me to the elevator, like some junior manager handling a difficult offboarding. There wasn't a flicker of doubt in his eyes, not even shame. 14 years of loyalty, dedication, and silent sacrifice wiped out in 15 minutes. But here's the thing about people. Like me, we don't scream, we don't beg, we watch. And when the time is right, we respond. He thought I was gone. He had no idea I'd already started building my own foundation, brick by quiet brick, years before he ever imagined pushing me out. Carrying that cardboard box out of the building felt like walking out of a life I had built with my bare hands, and being told it was never really mine. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I walked past the receptionist, past the framed awards I helped us win, past the photos of Lucas shaking hands with industry elites like he was the heartbeat of Whitmore Escapes. No one stopped me. No one said a word. Not even Lucas, who just watched me go like he was checking off a task. But the silence didn't break me. It reminded me. My mother used to say, "They can take the fruit, but not the roots. No one can steal what you've planted deep." And I'd planted deep, far deeper than Lucas ever knew. See, 5 years ago, during a quarterly review, I noticed something odd. 3 of our top-performing resorts, Bayside Haven, Summit Hollow, and the flagship Coral Dunes, were all built on leased land. At the time, it seemed like a small detail. The original owners were aging, the leases long-term, and affordable, but I couldn't shake the discomfort. What would happen if those leases changed hands? If the heirs wanted to hike prices or sell the land out from under us? So I made a move. Quietly. Carefully. I took savings no one knew I had, moved it into a holding company under my name, C. Whitmore Holdings, and bought the land outright when the owners were ready to let go. Then I drafted leaseback agreements that kept everything running exactly as before, even giving Whitmore Escapes favorable terms. I wasn't trying to get rich. I was trying to protect us, protect the business, protect the name, protect the legacy. Lucas never noticed. Of course he didn't. He was too busy chasing magazine covers and influencer deals, building his image instead of checking the foundation. I filed the documents, signed the leases, logged everything with the legal team, and left it buried in corporate records because at the time, I still trusted my family. I thought we were on the same side. Now, walking away from a company I had poured my soul into, I realized just how much value I had always brought, and how little of it Lucas had ever seen. He thought I was just the operations girl, the fixer, the one who made sure towels were folded right and invoices got paid on time. But I was the reason we were stable. I was the reason guests kept coming back. I was the reason the lights stayed on. And I was also, unknowingly to him, the landlord. 3 of our most profitable properties didn't belong to Whitmore Escapes anymore. They belonged to me. And those sweetheart lease terms I'd written, they were set to expire in just under 3 months. Lucas thought he'd cut me loose. He had no idea he'd just kicked the wrong person out of the room. Because what he didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that the land beneath his empire, that was mine. And I had just remembered exactly how much it was worth. I didn't go nuclear. Not right away. That's not who I am. Revenge might taste sweet, but strategy, that lasts. After I left Whitmore Escapes, I laid low. No press statements, no dramatic tell-alls, just silence. I spent my days checking in on old contacts, housekeepers I'd hired, regional managers I'd mentored, even front desk associates who still remembered the exact way I liked guest complaints handled. And what they told me? It turned my stomach. New consultant Lucas hired had started slashing everything. Staff hours were cut. Vendor contracts, many of which I'd spent years negotiating for quality, were dropped for cheaper, lower-tier suppliers. Housekeeping rotations were doubled up. Maintenance requests got ignored unless something was on literal fire. I heard about entire weekend wedding events being ruined by plumbing issues and overbookings. Our reputation, the one I had carefully built over 14 years, was unraveling fast, and Lucas didn't seem to care. He was already on to his next thing. It didn't take long before I started hearing whispers. One of the senior concierges at Coral Dunes let it slip. Lucas had been seen at meetings with high-end developers outside our usual circles. Another told me about unusual file requests, internal occupancy projections, renovation cost breakdowns, supplier contracts, all being pulled up without explanation. Then came the real kicker. A business registration filed under Northland Vista Inc., with Lucas's name attached. So I did what any sane person would do. I started digging. Turns out, my dear brother had been planning this for over a year. Northland Vista wasn't just an exploration. It was a full-blown hospitality brand, set up as a separate entity under a different holding company, with plans to open 3 resorts within 2 miles of our highest-grossing Whitmore properties. And the funding. Private investors, some of whom had connections to firms that once backed our growth. His pitch? A sleeker, more modern version of the Whitmore experience. But the most infuriating part? He was setting us up for failure. Lucas had been quietly pushing our board to consider offloading underperforming assets due to rising land costs and operational drag. What he didn't mention was that those assets sat on land I owned, and if sold off, they'd be prime targets for himself to swoop in and acquire at a discount. He was trying to bankrupt the soul of our company to resurrect it under his own name. No history, no legacy. Just profit. That's when I knew I couldn't just protect what I had built. I had to protect everyone else still stuck inside the sinking ship, the staff, the guests, the properties themselves. So I picked up the phone and scheduled a meeting. Not with Lucas, not with the board, with Commonwealth Hospitality Group, one of the only major players I trusted to treat people like people and not numbers on a spreadsheet. While Lucas plotted in shadows, I was about to move in daylight, with leverage he didn't even know I had. About 3 weeks after I walked out of Whitmore Escapes, I got a text from Lucas. Casual, like nothing had happened. Hey, can you send over the vendor files and your old maintenance logs? Transition's been a little bumpy. I stared at the screen for a minute, trying to decide if I should laugh or scream. He really thought he could fire me like a disposable intern and then ask me to clean up after the mess? I took a breath and replied, "All documents were properly filed in the shared system before my departure. Personal notes are not company property. Short. Professional. Final." A few days later, I got a letter from Whitmore's legal team. Formal request for all materials relevant to operational continuity. I forwarded it to my attorney, who responded with a detailed list of every file still accessible on the server, and a polite but ironclad statement clarifying that my handwritten notes, staff assessments, and renovation plans, created on personal time, were mine alone. Then came the call from his assistant, flustered and clearly coached. "Lucas would really appreciate if you could meet to discuss some urgent matters regarding the resort leases." I almost said too late, but instead, I agreed. Curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see his face when he realized the chessboard had shifted. We met in a private conference room at the Whitmore corporate office. He looked tired, no doubt from trying to micromanage an empire he never actually understood. He jumped straight in. "There's confusion about the land our resorts are on. Some conflicting documents. We need clarification before the board votes on the restructuring proposal." I didn't blink. "There's no confusion. The land belongs to C. Whitmore Holdings. Lease agreements expire in 6 weeks. I'll be proposing new terms, market rates." His jaw tightened. "Claire, that could triple our costs." "That's not my problem," I said calmly, folding my hands. "You removed me from company matters, remember? I'm simply acting as a property owner now." That's when the shift happened. The mask cracked. Lucas wasn't the polished CEO anymore. He was just my older brother, suddenly realizing he had lit a fuse under his own business. He started to backpedal, suggesting a revised arrangement, maybe a consulting role for me or some equity-based compensation, if I could help ease the transition. But I'd already moved on. I'd already met with Maplebridge Hospitality, a rising giant with a reputation for ethical takeovers and staff-first policies. Their CEO, Elaine Doran, listened to my pitch over lunch at the Harbor Club and didn't hesitate. "We'd love to acquire the structures," she said. "You keep the land. We'll offer retention packages to your former staff. Legacy matters to us." That was the moment I knew Lucas had lost. Not just the upper hand, but the loyalty, the history, the ground beneath his feet. He thought he'd pushed me out. He never realized I was the one holding the floorboards. Starting over felt strange at first. After spending nearly half my adult life inside Whitmore Escapes, walking away from it all, name, title, legacy, was like peeling off a second skin. But as the dust settled, I realized something powerful. I didn't need a legacy built under someone else's name. I could build something of my own, from the ground up, with the lessons I'd bled for and the people who still believed in me. I launched Harborline Advisory, a boutique hospitality consulting firm focused on post-acquisition transitions. The idea was simple. Make sure when big companies take over smaller ones, the soul of the place doesn't get bulldozed in the name of efficiency. I'd seen firsthand how corporate takeovers often meant gutting teams, replacing warm familiarity with sterile policies, and turning places that once felt like home into bland profit machines. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not on my watch. Maplebridge didn't just agree to keep the staff at Coral Dunes, Bayside Haven, and Summit Hollow. They embraced it. Elaine Doran, their CEO, brought me in as regional operations consultant. And within a month I was back on site. Not as an employee, but as a partner. I walked the hallways again. This time with purpose, not pressure. I reintroduced myself to the night shift housekeepers, the pastry chefs, the grounds crew, the people who made those resorts what they were. I looked them in the eye and said, "You're staying. No one's getting cut, not on my watch." And I meant it. There was no corner office waiting for me, no golden placard on a mahogany door. Just a standing desk in a shared suite and a stack of legal pads I actually used. I didn't want status. I wanted impact. My job now was to be the buffer between the soulless bureaucracy of acquisition and the real people who made things run. I wrote onboarding manuals that respected local culture. I fought to retain long-standing supplier contracts with the family-owned businesses we'd partnered with for years. I made sure no one was streamlined just because they weren't. Flashy enough on paper, and the wild thing? I was happy. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing someone else's expectations or cleaning up behind Lucas's PR stunts. I was creating something rooted in truth. The hotels didn't just survive the transition, they flourished. Guest satisfaction improved, staff morale rebounded. Word spread, and suddenly other companies were calling me, asking if Harborline could help them do better. Lucas thought he'd exiled me from the industry. What he really did was free me. I had lost the company name, but I kept the heart. And that turned out to be the only thing that mattered. The email came from a former board member at Whitmore Escapes, someone who used to avoid eye contact during meetings when Lucas spoke, someone I never thought would reach out. The subject. Line was short. It's happening. I clicked it open and read every word twice. Turns out the rumors about Lucas's side project, Northland Vista Inc., had reached the boardroom. Investors don't like surprises, especially the kind where your CEO is building a competing brand behind your back while pretending to restructure the existing one. Once someone dug into the permit applications, investor lists, and overlapping vendor contacts, the truth unraveled quickly. Lucas wasn't just moonlighting, he was positioning himself to cannibalize the company from within. The board demanded his resignation in a closed-door emergency session. No grand exit speech, no press release, just a hushed change in leadership, and a sudden personal leave announcement on the company website. I didn't gloat. I didn't even respond to the board member who sent the email. What was there to say? They had chosen him, and now they were cleaning up the mess they allowed to happen. The offers came, of course. Return as interim COO. Join the board. Help stabilize the transition. But I politely declined every single one. I wasn't going back to fix what they'd let rot. My time there was over, not because I lost, but because I had won in the only way that mattered. The 3 resorts that Lucas once tried to steal out from under me, they were thriving under Maplebridge. We rebranded slightly, but kept the charm intact. The locals still referred to them by their original names, and the guests kept coming back. Even better, staff turnover dropped to near zero. The new managers came from within. People I'd trained years ago who were now leading with the same quiet strength we'd built the company on. I'd walk into Coral Dunes now and see a full lobby, a smiling concierge, and a pastry chef who knew returning guests. By name, it wasn't just a resort. It was a second chance, for everyone. I sometimes hear whispers about Lucas trying to pitch new projects, but his name doesn't carry the weight it once did. Trust is hard to rebuild when your foundation was betrayal. Meanwhile, Harborline Advisory has more clients than I ever imagined. Companies looking to scale without selling their souls. Leaders who value integrity over flash. People keep asking if I miss being at Whitmore Escapes. If I miss the title, the legacy, the name. But the truth? I've never felt more at home than I do now. Free from board politics, walking through the resorts I helped protect, knowing that I saved the best parts without needing a seat at anyone's table, because I built my own. A year after his quiet exit, Lucas's shiny new venture, Northland Vista Inc., filed for bankruptcy. Turns out, building a resort chain isn't as easy as borrowing someone else's playbook and gutting the soul out of it. His investors pulled out, his permits expired, and the glossy branding he spent 6 figures on couldn't cover up the fact that he didn't understand hospitality, He only understood optics. And optics don't fix a leaky roof or win over a tired guest at midnight. I didn't celebrate. Not really. Watching someone fail, even someone who betrayed you, doesn't bring peace. What brought peace was knowing that I never had to step on anyone to stand tall. I chose to build something better, not louder, not bigger, just real. And it worked. My father, now fully retired, meets me for breakfast some Sundays. He's softer. These days. Less defensive, more reflective. We don't talk about Lucas much. Sometimes he asks about the kids, and I tell him how my daughter's gotten into photography, and my son still thinks the housekeeping carts at Coral Dunes are race cars. There's no bitterness, just boundaries. I didn't cut him off. I just stopped bleeding for people who didn't bother to notice I was hurt. One evening, I stood on the balcony of the Westlake Resort, our crown jewel, and looked out over the lake. The lights shimmered on the water, music played softly from a wedding reception below, and laughter echoed up from the fire pits. I wasn't wearing a suit. I wasn't on the schedule. I was just there, breathing it in. That's when it hit me. Success isn't about who holds the biggest title or who gets quoted in the press release. It's about who builds something that lasts, even after they're gone. It's about roots, foundations. The kind of work no one claps for, but everyone stands on. So if you've ever been pushed out, overlooked, or underestimated, don't rush to prove them wrong. Just build something so solid they can't tear it down, even if they try. And hey, if you made it to the end of my story, thank you. Drop a like, hit subscribe, and stick around. I've got more stories where this one came from. Because sometimes the quiet ones, we're just getting started.